So it's a wonderful opportunity for me to talk about this very important topic. I would say the heading is very complex. The topic of the talk today is the Buddha's world, and the subtext or the subtitle of the talk is the past, the present, and our future. And I think as we are thinking about this topic, the Buddha's world, it's not a topic that can be dealt in a span of a few hours because it's a very encyclopedic sort of a topic. And therefore, the treatment that I am trying to give today is provide you little bit of glimpses of what it would be the Buddha's world. So first of all, the time as such doesn't apply to the Buddha's teachings, because according to I am a Buddhist and I believe that what the Buddha taught is Sanatana. There's a beautiful Pali verse where Buddha says that nahi verena verani. The world, the hatred cannot be appeased by hatred. Only with love the hatred can be converted into love, and that is the eternal law. Eso Dhammo Sanantano. So the word Buddha uses Sanantano. And the truths that the Buddha taught or discovered, these truths are akaliko, they are timeless. So they can be verified not only here, not only in the present moment, but they are verifiable in the future and all the times. So the Buddha's truth is akaliko. So when we talk about the three times, I will begin with a disclaimer that we are not talking about the truths that the Buddha discovered, particularly the truth of impermanence. Whatever happens to the world, the truth of impermanence is not going to change. Everything is subjected to change. Everything is bound to change. That is the fundamental law the Buddha discovered. That nothing is same, anicca, not always so. And the second truth that the Buddha discovered is everything in the world is relational. There is nothing absolute in the world. Everything is relative. Everything is relational. Even the reality of the world is relational. And that has been now what the scientists have discovered. And when we perceive something which is nicca, impermanent, as permanent, we suffer. Okay. So these truths, that our perceptions, if they are wrong perceptions, if they are misperceptions, we are bound to suffer. Okay. So dukkha. So three words, and they are traditionally called T-lakhana. In Pali it is called T-lakhana. Anicca, Anatma and Dukkha. Okay, they are the truths that the Buddha discovered. And when I am talking about the Buddha's words, I am not talking about the truths that Buddha discovered, because they are, I believe that they are eternal truths. What may happen to the world is subjected to impermanence. It's never going to be the same, because of the fact, the reality of impermanence, that everything exists. Okay, and the truth, the reality is relational. There is nothing absolute about it. We cannot say that this is absolute or that is absolute. Everything is relational, which in traditional Buddhist terms we call paticca samutpada, interdependence. We are not dependent. We are not independent. There is nothing in the world which is independent. Everything is interdependent. Everything is relational. And if we don't perceive the world like this, as impermanent and lacking the absolute reality or truth, we suffer. So, dukkha, anicca, anatma and dukkha. So we will just leave these eternal teachings of the Buddha aside. So what I mean by the world, the Buddha's world, is the world that surrounds us in terms of the reality that is unfolding before us. So we as a human being, we deal with the political world, we deal with the economic world, we deal with a sociological world, we deal with the environment, and so on and so forth. So my point is, when we talk about the Buddha's world, I'm going to talk about these all realities that are unfolding before us. Okay, and the realities of three times, like the past, present, future. Buddha says that you cannot experience what is gone, gata, and we cannot experience what is going to come, anagata. Right? Only in the Pachupanna, in this present moment, the reality is unfolding, and that's where we can understand, where we can touch the reality. So Gatam is gone, which is already gone. Anagatam is not yet, it has not yet arrived. And the word for the present is Pachupanna, emerging in front of my eyes, emerging in front of my senses. And that's why the Buddha said that be mindful of the present. Be mindful about what is unfolding before you right now, here and now. Okay. So when we are talking about the present, because I am going to begin with the present, and I am going to then go back to the past and to the future. So when we talk about the present moment in terms of what is happening to the Buddha's world, this is not a bad time for Buddhism. Because in the traditional countries where Buddhism has been established, for example in India, the Buddhism is coming back with a very astonishing field. I travel all over the places, and I know that people all over India, particularly the Ambedkarites, are open to Buddhism. And this is not the case only in Maharashtra, but all over the places. People are open to learn about Buddhism. Secondly, the other country which is supposed to be a very had a very strong base in Buddhism, that is China. In China, the spirit of Buddhism is awakening. And when we are talking about India and China, we are already talking about 25% of the world's population belong to China and 16% to India. So you are almost talking about half of the world. But even if we leave it aside, China and India, we know that in the Western countries, particularly in Europe and America, recently one article was written by Rebecca Solnit. She is a very famous writer and a feminist, and she was writing after the death of Thich Nhat Hanh. And she says that the West has been influenced by the ideas of Buddhism, like the idea of equality, which is so profound a discovery that Buddha had, that all human beings are equal. Now we think that it's natural to believe so. But at the time of the Buddha, it was very difficult for people to believe that the people are equal. They either belong to certain tribes or certain groups, but they didn't believe that all human beings are equal. So that was a revolutionary sort of an insight of the Buddha, to know that all human beings are equal. There is no scope for any discrimination on the basis of anything, be it a race, religion, caste, whatever you name it. The Buddha said that there is no basis by which we can discriminate people. All human beings are equal. Very profound, and that's how the Buddhism went all over the places, because of this single insight of the Buddha. That there is no difference between you and me. There is no difference between the people. So what Rebecca Solnit has done, she has through that article appeared in Guardian a couple of days back, she has tried to spell out how Buddhism has impacted with these new ideas of Buddhism: compassion, equality, respect and reverence for other human beings, the people in the West. So geographically we see that Buddhism has been spreading at this moment all over the place. There is a reawakening of the spirit in China. There is a resurgence of Buddhism in India. It's going on. In all the traditional countries, people are trying to make sense of Buddhism. And in the West, particularly in Europe and America, there is a lot of opening. There is a lot of sort of interest in Buddhism. Secondly, the second field that the Buddhism has been appealing to the people is in the area of psychology, what is called the positive psychology. And we know that the Buddha was the person who gave the technology of mind. He taught us, he gave a very systematic teaching as to how our minds can be transformed from whatever mental states we are into, how they can be transformed into positive mental states. So even if we are filled with destructive emotions, the Buddha has given us the path, the way forward out of those destructive emotions, and how we can cultivate the constructive and positive emotions. So Buddhism has been a part of what is called the positive psychology. And the monks are invited in the labs, and their brain states are studied, and so on and so forth. Besides the field, the forays in psychology, there are scientists, like there is one scientist, Carlo Rovelli. He's a very famous quantum physicist, and he writes wonderfully on the quantum world, and recently he has written a book about explaining the quantum physics, and in one of the chapters he talks about Nagarjuna as to how the Buddhists have spoken about the reality as relational phenomena, not something absolute, and that's what the quantum mechanics is all about. So even the scientists are talking about the Buddhism. There are people who, this word mindfulness has entered into common parlance now. So there are like people who are dealing with mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness-based healing, as to how the Buddhist meditational practices can help you to heal yourself very deeply. Then there are other areas like Buddhism, in terms of how Buddhism can bring social transformation. So there is a movement within Buddhism called socially engaged Buddhism. And it's now a very sort of popular movement, not only in the traditional Buddhist countries, but even also in India. There are a lot of people who sort of trace on what is called the socially engaged Buddhism. So if we survey the present world and our times, contemporary times, we can see that the Buddhism is still making an impact and influence on the people, not only on the geographical areas or among the different cultures and different communities, but it's also making foray into science. It's also talking with psychology. It's also talking with political science, so on and so forth. I think this is a very astonishing period when we are talking about Buddhism today. It's a very astonishing time. As far as Buddhism is concerned, it's a very exciting time. And I read somewhere that Buddhism is the largest sort of a philosophy represented on the internet. If we use the word religion, Buddhism is the largest, represented religion online. There are so many courses, there are so many free lectures available on Buddhism. You just have to go and Google and you will find out that these things are available to us. So when we have this survey, when we are seeing what is unfolding before us at this moment, at this point of time, we begin to see that the contemporary world is very much infused by the Buddha's teachings. There are logicians who are grappling with the logics given by the Buddhists. So why is this so? What is it about Buddhism that it goes on appealing to people? So traditionally, what we call religion, the definition of religion doesn't apply to Buddhism. There are very many definitions, and if we read the Buddha and his Dhamma, we can come across many definitions that Baba Ambedkar has given. So Dhamma is something, I would say, it has that effect to create civilization. When Buddhists talk about the human societies, we talk in terms of the civilization. When we remember the Gandhara, what happened in Gandhara, we call it Gandhara civilization. It was a civilization. It has that force to civilize the humanity. Everywhere Buddhism went, it played its vital role in civilizing the communities. The communities have been barbarian. The communities have been, governed by the very limited logic, very limited ethics. And the Buddhism has that impact on the society to humanize and civilize the communities. So whenever we look at the Buddhism in the past, we have to look at Buddhism in terms of this civilization, as a force which civilizes, as a philosophy which humanizes. See, in this world today, people have a lot of talks about force, using force to change the world. But imagine the Ashokan society. Now we are talking about the past. Imagine the Ashokan society that without applying the force or violence, the way Ashoka created, he is called the founder of India. Buddhism was the first movement in this country which has unified the people from not only the Indian subcontinent, but all the way up to Afghanistan. You will be surprised to know now these recent discoveries are coming. When we look at the ancient India, what we are taught and what it was, they are totally very different. For example, the India at the time of the Buddha was well connected with the world. There was a road from Kapilavastu which will come to what is called the Uttar Patha, the northern highway. And that northern highway from Pataliputra, present day Patna, it will all the way go to Afghanistan. It's a big highway. And a lot of trade and commerce was taking place. That's why you see on this Uttarapath, a lot of Buddhist sites and universities. And there was one Dakshin Path. Now this Uttar Path was developed after that Grand Trunk Road and whatnot. So it was like a highway and it's still there. You can still find the remains of what is called the Northern Highway. And that ran all the way from from Bangladesh all the way up to Afghanistan. So you can imagine how much quantum of trade taking place at that time. And this whole world was connected peacefully, harmoniously at the time of Ashoka. That's why we see Ashokan scriptures everywhere. You see Ashokan's scripture all the way to the frontiers of Europe. There is an Ashokan inscription which is bilingual. It's written in Greek alphabets and Aramaic language. It's a bilingual. So you can imagine that Ashoka has gone there. It was discovered in 1976, that inscription. In India, if you go up to south, they have discovered a site called Sannati in Gulbarga, which is supposed to be where Ashoka has died. South India. Now imagine Peshawar, Takshila, and imagine South India, and imagine Pataliputra. You begin to see that how much big landmass Ashoka created based on his firm belief in the Buddha's Dhamma. And even at the time of the Buddha, because there is not much difference of time between the Buddha and Ashoka. At the time of Ashoka itself, the Buddhism has gone, Buddha himself, the Buddhism has reached to Maharashtra. There are archaeological evidences, there is the textual evidences which prove that at the time of the Buddha, the Dhamma has reached to Maharashtra. The Dhamma has reached to Gujarat, the Dhamma has reached to Gandhara, Peshawar. The Dhamma has reached to, all the way in Andhra Pradesh. The Dhamma has reached to Orissa, the Dhamma has reached to, Bangladesh, the present day Bangladesh. According to one legendary story, the Dhamma has already reached to Afghanistan when the Buddha was alive. Because there were two people who made Buddha, Tapusya and Vallika. They were the first people who made Buddha after his enlightenment. And apparently they were from the Balkh region of Afghanistan. And that stupa still exists. That stupa still exists. You look at the newspapers. There was a newspaper, there was a news report from Pakistan that they have discovered a new Buddhist site. Recently, I have been to Gujarat and I have been to Vadnagar, which happens to be Modi's birthplace. There the excavation is going on. And they discovered a big stupa there. A very big stupa they have exhumed through the archaeological excavations. So can you imagine the extent? Now we are talking in Nagpur. Just a few kilometers away from here, there is a site called Mansar. And when you visit Mansar, you become spellbound looking at it. How could they do it? That main structure, the stupa structure, is so astonishingly orthogonal and hexagonal, and the cells of the monks and so on and so forth. I have been there 1 month back and I've seen Mansar. Before you couldn't see anything, but after the excavation, now you can see that site is so beautiful. And I request you all to visit Mansar. You look at Buldhana, from where my lawyer friend Pradeep comes from. They have discovered a very wonderful Buddhist site in Buldhana, in Chandrapur, in Bhandara, Pauni. You go south 30 kilometers, you will find some Buddhist site. So all under this surface of our country, the Buddhism is deeply buried. Everywhere, all over the places. In Kerala, they have dumped the Buddha images in the lakes. So today they are now, when the lakes are drying, they are finding out the Buddha image. The Buddha images are emerging in Kerala. In Tamil Nadu, when the people are farming, the Buddha image will, just come out. So what is this? What has happened? The greatest mystery of the, I would say, world history is what happened to Buddhism in India. It was a very strong force for a long time. It gave India culture, it gave India civilization, because it, as I told you, it was a civilizing force. It has civilized and humanized the masses. Then what happened to this? The answers of which are given by Baba Sahib Ambedkar, and very remarkably. We cannot challenge that now historically. On historical ground, we cannot challenge whatever Baba Sahib Ambedkar has written. There is a small paper that Baba Sahib Ambedkar has written on fall and decline of Buddhism, where he goes into what happened to Buddhism in India. And Buddhism in India had been destroyed by violence. Everywhere you go, you look at the Buddhist sites, they were burnt. When Buddhism was on ascent, what has happened? The Brahmanism opposed it. Before the arrival of Muslims in India, the history of India was nothing but the history of conflict between the Brahmanism and Buddhism. And it's very evident. If you read how the Buddhist monks were burnt alive, if you read how they were killed, you will be astonished. And then the Muslims came, and you know that Muslims are Buddhishikar. They are opposed to the idol worship, and they started destroying whatever idols there were, and sometimes violently. And I would recommend all of you to read that very beautiful paper. It's not more than 8 or 9 pages. So wonderfully researched piece on what has gone wrong with Buddhism in India. So you imagine now that in India there are all over the places the Buddhist sites. I told you, in Nagpur itself there is a Buddhist site. In Bandara, in Buldana, you go to Aurangabad, you go to Latur. In Latur there are Buddhist caves. You go to Kolhapur, you go all over this coastal Maharashtra, Dakhan, everywhere there are Buddhist sites. Then what happened to the Buddhists? Where are the Buddhists? So, the Buddhists have been prosecuted to the extent that they were forced to become the untouchables. And it's very clearly proved by the Baba Sahib Ambedkar has written very beautifully on this, who were untouchables. But there was a person in 1948, he wrote a book on Buddhism in Kerala, P.C. Alexander. And he has gone into that, and he has showed that how the prosecution of Buddhism led to people, treated as a low caste. And in the cultural history, in lot of textual things, in the Puranic literature, you can find all these evidences. So who were the Buddhists? What happened to the Buddhists? That is a big question. And here we can quote Baba Sahib Ambedkar that, if we forget our history, we cannot create history. Before we were forced to become untouchable or forced to live like an untouchable. What was our history? Who were us? Who were, what was our community like? And unless we know that, we cannot know where we are supposed to go. So we need to historicize what has happened, looking at the present. What has happened? What has gone wrong with that great civilizing force that not only civilized the Indian subcontinent, but countries like Mongolia, Sri Lanka. Before the advent of Buddhism, before coming in the contact of Buddhism, what Baba Sahib says, it was like ancient regime. If anybody had studied French Revolution, they will understand what Baba Sahib meant by ancient regime. So ancient regime was a very draconian society, full of oppression, full of suppression, full of exploitation of the people. And when the Buddha came into being, the whole reality, when the French Revolution took place, the whole reality of the French society was changed. So what Baba Sahib says, before the advent of Buddhism, India was like a dark, sort of in the dark age. So Buddha dawned a new light into the Indian society. So the point that I'm trying to make of the past is that we have to understand past, and without understanding past, we cannot think about the future. As I told you, that you go everywhere, in every nook and cranny of this country, everywhere you go, and dig beneath the surface, you will find the remains of the Buddhist remains. Some monuments, some artifacts, some Buddha images. It's found in Kerala, it's found in Tamil Nadu. In Madhya Pradesh, there are many Buddhist sites. And I told you, recently I have been to Gujarat. I traveled all over the places in Gujarat. And even imagine that in a place like Sana, where the lions frequent, there are 62 beautiful Buddha images, Buddhist caves. And they are supposed to be very ancient Buddhist caves. Because that time the trading was taking place from there. Dwarka, Somnath, Mathura. All the archaeological evidences are pointing to that. There was a school of thought. There was a school of art called Mathura school. There was one Gandhara school. In Mathura, you will find amazing Buddha images. Even today, in Bihar, sometimes you hear a news that in a certain village the Buddhist image was found. So, what has happened to Buddhism? Baba Ambedkar has given a very conclusive answer to the question. He says that before the advent of Islam, the Buddhism was declining because there was a conflict between Brahmanism and Buddhism. And out of the conflict between Brahmanism and Buddhism, the untouchability came into being. And we must know our social history. We must know who were we, what happened to us. And the untouchability is not the phenomenon of Maharashtra. It's all over the places. That means there has to be something common that led to treating a class of people as the untouchables. If it was a local phenomena, we could understand local dynamics. The Buddha was called a Shudra. He was in Baba Ambedkar cites Esukari Sutta, where the Brahmins used to address Buddha as Bho Gautama and as a Shudra. So, about the past, when we talk about the 3 times, like we have dwelt into what is happening to Buddhism in the present, the Buddhism is not declining. There is a good news for the Buddhists. In China, the Buddhist spirit is reawakening. There are a lot of beautiful Buddhist temples are coming up. In China, 25% of world population we are talking about. In India, 16% of the world population that we are talking about. Everywhere you go, people are open to Buddhism because of Baba Ambedkar. Everybody wants to know about Buddhism. It's same everywhere. In Kerala, in Tamil Nadu, in Bihar, in Gujarat, everywhere it's the same. There is the same sort of a spiritual, I would say, thirst to know Buddha's teaching. Then I told you about the West. In Europe, in America, people are so open to Buddhism. And it has been influencing different disciplines as it were. It is influencing the psychology, it's influencing what we can say sociology, it is influencing even the politics. And then we have tried to historicize the Buddha's world in terms of what has gone wrong. So when we think about the past, we have to bear in mind, we have to understand history, because history is a guide for us to take decision for the future. Because future is about choices. What do we choose? How do we go from here to there? And that history, whatever the future there is, that will be determined by our present understanding, by our present outlook, by our present action. Because in the scheme of Baba Ambedkar, the Kamma is a force that decides whether the public order will be moral or not. I think that's very deep inside of Baba Ambedkar in terms of Buddhism. So when we think about future, and we have titled it like this: the past, the present, and our future. So I'm not going to talk about the future of the Buddhist or the future of humanity. I'm going to narrow down my inquiry to our future. How do we make sense of what is happening in the world in terms of our future, the future of our community? So basically, I'm going to make a few points in this area. The first is, there are a lot of Buddhisms in the world. One of the scholars, he says ex-Buddhism. So you replace X by Thai or Tibetan or Western or Mahayana, Hinayana, Zen, Tantra, whatnot. So there will be a lot of people, there are a lot of Buddhisms. And it's okay, there is no problem with it. Because Buddhism by its essence is going to flower into different flowers. That's the beauty of Buddhism. It is going to flower depending on the situation and the context and the attitudes of the people. Okay? So we have no problem with so many forms of Buddhism. But when we are talking about our future, in terms of Buddha's world, we have to know what kind of a Buddhism we need to practice. What sort of a Buddhist framework that we should have in order to take our community in the future. Okay, now we don't have to reinvent the wheel. It has already been done by our great leader Baba Sahib Ambedkar. There are monumental things that Baba Sahib Ambedkar has written. And our community needs to engage with those writings and speeches of Baba Sahib Ambedkar very rigorously, not superficially. Not superficially. We have to go in the depth of writings and speeches of Baba Sahib Ambedkar. Well, let me tell you, writing Buddha and his Dhamma, Baba Sahib Ambedkar has taken years to write Buddha and his Dhamma. He started writing Buddha and his Dhamma after drafting the Constitution of India. The Constitution of India took 3 years, more or less, 2 years and 11 months. But Baba Sahib Ambedkar started in 50 writing the Buddha and his Dhamma, and he didn't, the book was not complete till his death. There are some editorial things that need to be done, but we get the gist of it, that a man, and Baba Sahib Ambedkar was not an ordinary scholar. He was somebody who would go deep into things. He wanted to study Buddhism, he learned Pali. And he not only learned Pali language, he mastered the Pali language. In order to write a dictionary, in order to write the grammar, you need to master the language. So Baba Sahib Ambedkar has done this. He has tried to attempt to write a dictionary of Pali language in 4 languages. So he has thoroughly gone into Pali text. But he was not somebody who had this narrow view of the Buddha Dhamma. In his store, in his book, in his library, there were more than 2,000 books on Buddha Dhamma. And his fascination for Buddhism was very old. He started reading Buddhism when he read Dada Kiruskar's book in 1909. And he was so deeply impacted by reading Dada Kiruskar book in 1909. And then when he went to Columbia University, he read Rhys Davies and whatnot. So it is not that the Buddha and his Dhamma started being built up in 1950. It has a long history of engagement of Baba Sahib Ambedkar, and there are a lot of references now available to us that shows that Baba Sahib Ambedkar was deeply has taken refuge in the Buddha. You look at the house he named. He always had this Buddha's picture or photo. In 1948, when he reprinted this Essence of Buddhism, T.L. Narsu's book, Essence of Buddhism, 100 pages of plates he put into the book. That time it was very difficult to put plates in the books. So he selected Buddha images from all over the places, lamas, photos and whatnot, the Japanese photos, Myanmar, Bhikshuni. You see? So, when we are talking about our future, we have to understand very deeply Baba Sahib's vision. We have to read the Buddha and his Dhamma. We have to not only read, but cogitate over, think over every single word, every single sentence that Baba Sahib Ambedkar has written in the Buddha and his Dhamma. Okay, so when we are talking about a future, we have to have the firm grasp and the clear understanding as to what sort of Buddhism we want to practice, what sort of a framework that Baba Sahib Ambedkar has given us. The second thing that Baba Sahib Ambedkar has asked us to read is the Buddha of Marx. It's a very small book, but it's a profound commentary on the Buddhist engagement with the contemporary political thoughts. And we have to historize the struggle of the community, what happened to Buddhism. We must read and understand the revolution and counter-revolution. This is not what I suggested. This is what Baba Sahib Ambedkar suggested. There are a lot of things that Baba Sahib Ambedkar has written on the Buddha Dhamma. There is enough for us to take forward his legacy and launch ourselves in the future. Another interesting thing that we have to think about in the future, when we are thinking about the Buddhism in the future, we cannot divorce Buddhism from democracy. That's a very interesting thought that Baba Ambedkar has written in an article in 1941 in Janta. That time even India had not had the power transferred to Indians. He has written in Janta, the Indians, they were very eager to have democracy, but they are like sick people. Their stomach is not healthy. They have to clear their stomach first. And only one doctor can clear that. And he said the doctor is who? Who is the doctor? The Buddha is the doctor, the great Dr. Buddha. And he said that if we want democracy in this country, we have to chant Mahamantra. Not only small mantra, he said Mahamantra, and that Mahamantra was Buddhang Saranam Gacchami, Dhammang Saranam Gacchami, Sangham Saranam Gacchami. That's 1941. That is 1941. And talking about the philosophy of religion, Baba Ambedkar said that justice as a norm to understand religion. And he said that the Buddhism can promote justice. And justice is nothing but, it's a condensed form of what is called liberty, equality and fraternity. If you want to say liberty, equality and fraternity in one word, that word is justice. And if you look at this conceptual framework that Baba Ambedkar has created, these are very deep thoughts, I am telling you. Baba Ambedkar has put a lot of efforts, he has gone very deeply into the things. And that's why we get it, on a platter. Any scholar who reads Baba Ambedkar will go mad, I will tell you. See, he is somebody who has studied economics, he has studied history, he has studied anthropology, what not, you just name it. And he has that bend of mind which has gone for truth. And he says that the purpose of the religion is to seek truth. Isn't it? So as a Buddhist, our pursuit is for the truth. Know the truth as truth and untruth as untruth in whatever domain of life. So, democracy. And this is something new that has never happened in the Buddha's world. Now the whole political structures, political states have changed. The bigger states have come, the bigger nation states have come. They have the constitutions. So in those constitutional framework, how do we situate this Buddhism as a civilization? So to M.B. Chitnis, Baba Ambedkar told him that M.B. Chitnis went to Baba Ambedkar and said that Baba Ambedkar, Baba Sahib, you have put some mythical stories there. In the book 1, there are some stories. He said, how does it happen? He said, my people need some mythology. There is not much mythology, some mythology. He said, it will promote culture, it will promote literature, it will promote art. Because if you want to create art, you need this kind of imaginative thinking. Maybe Yogesh will be able to tell you. Okay, you cannot create art only through reasons. You need that imaginative thinking. But later on he said, in the same dialogue with M.B. Chitnis, that my Buddha and his Dhamma is completely in accordance with the Constitution of India. It's fully rational. It will promote a society that is envisioned by the Constitution of India. This is very profound. So for us, the Buddhism is not just a religion. It is not something that we go to the vihara and chant. We have to do it. We have to go to vihara, we have to chant, we have to practice, we have to meditate, we have to learn and study. But Baba Ambedkar has taken it to all together on a different level. So when we are talking about the Buddhism, the Buddha's word in the future, we have to see how Buddhism can promote democracy. How Buddhism can create a word that is just, human, equal. That is not just the mandate of the Buddha and Dhamma. That is not just Buddha's mandate, but it's also the mandate of our constitution. Isn't it? Isn't it? It's the same mandate. There's no difference between the two. So the second point The first is that we have to understand Baba Sahib Ambedkar's framework very deeply. We have to engage with his writings and speeches. Think over every single word, every single sentence. We have to understand it very deeply, as much clearly as we can. Secondly, we have to think about justice. We have to think about how Buddhism can create a just society. That means we have to be very mindful of the caste system, as to how it shouldn't perpetuate the great gift that Baba Sahib Ambedkar has given us. As a Buddhist, we have to strive hard to annihilate the caste, to destroy the caste, to create more egalitarian society, more equal society. The third point that is very interesting and important when we are looking at our future in Buddhism is that the Buddhism is not in contradiction with the scientific thinking. Scientific thinking is based on the evidences. And the Buddha, I would say, was the first among the scientists who talked about the law of cause and effect. He said, this is, that is. This is not, that is not. With the arising of this, that arises. With the cessation of this, that ceases. It's a law of cause and effect. And John Dewey, Baba Sahib Ambedkar's teacher, says, whoever has understood the law of causation has understood what is the scientific thinking. You know, how does the scientist work? They try to know what leads to what. What is the relation of this to that? Isn't it? So, as a Buddhist today, and when we are thinking about our future, we have to be very, very mindful of what is happening in the scientific world. Our thinking, our being should be based on evidences. We cannot just believe in speculative things. Baba Sahib Ambedkar was very wary against speculative thinking. So we are always trying to speculate about things. Baba Sahib Ambedkar says, no, some of the answers might not be given today, maybe in the future. But you cannot have the speculative thinking. You cannot just have a thinking which is based on speculation and beliefs. In other words, we have to explore deeply in a scientific way, based on evidence. And that's what the Buddha said. When you don't accept my teaching just like that, you test it. Like the goldsmith will test a gold, whether it's a pure gold or it's a fake gold. Isn't it? So the third thing when we are talking about our future is to enter into domain of science. We have to understand science. We have to understand scientific thinking. We have to understand new methods of inquiry into the world. Where there is no method of inquiry, we have to devise a new method of inquiry. And the fourth and the last point when we are talking about our future in Buddhism, we cannot forget economy. We cannot forget economic development because, as Baba Sahib Ambedkar said, Buddha never ennobled the poverty. And if we look at the historical records of the Buddhists, all these places were very rich. You cannot have Ajanta, Ellora without having wealth. You cannot dig 60 caves in Sana, in Gujarat, without having wealth. You cannot create that art. You cannot create that beautiful paintings without having money. And the archaeological history has been saying that the Buddhist monk has been engaged in the society. In China, in Dunhuang, they have found the scrolls where the Buddhist monks were maintaining the records of the transactions. In a way, they were like the banks of that time. Those were the places where the caravan traders used to halt. As I told you, there was a big highway going in the north called Uttar Path, and there was a big highway going all the way down to Tamil Nadu called Dakshin Path. And huge trading was going on. 500 carts. Anath Pindaka had 500 carts. That means how much volume of the trade, how much money they might be generating that time. So Buddhist, when we are talking about our future, we cannot ennoble the poverty. We have to create wealth. That's a part of our framework, that we have to create wealth. Without creating wealth, we cannot support. the Buddhist movement. It's not possible to support the Buddhist movement. It happened in the past that there was a huge wealth. I will just tell you the story. You know what Ashoka used to do in order to create the wealth for the Sangha? He will donate the whole Jambudip to the Bhikshu Sangha. To the Sangha, he will donate the whole Bhikshu Sangha. And then he will buy 3 times. You got it? He will donate once and then he will buy Jambudip 3 times from the Sangha. And that's how the whole wealth, whatever wealth was incurred by that process, used to go into building the Buddhist establishments. In the history of the world, there was not a concept of universities. We had these world-class universities. Maybe 15 world-class universities we had. We only talk about Nalanda and Takshashila, but what about Vallabhi? What about Udantapuri? Ajanta setup might be a university setup. People have written books there. Whatever we read today in terms of the Buddhist philosophies, those books were written in Ajanta, some of them. Some of the books were written in South India. The great masters, the great teachers lived there. The library was burning for so many days in Nalanda. So you can imagine what kind of a volume of the books they might be having. So, coming back, and this is how I am going to summarize it. Presently, as the word is unfolding before us, Pachupanna, we can see that Buddhism is on the ascent. It's not declining. In India, there were hardly Buddhists before Baba Sahib Ambedkar converted to Buddhism. But today, because of Baba Sahib Ambedkar, all over the places in India, go north, south, east, west, people are so much open to Buddhism. They want to know Buddhism. They want to learn Buddhism. Secondly, in China, the Buddhism is coming up. In the West, the Buddhism is coming up. People are interested. Different disciplines of knowledge, they are interested in Buddhism. So Buddhism is having dialogue with psychology. Buddhism is having dialogue with anthropology. Buddhism is having dialogue with the history. Because Indian history cannot be understood without understanding Buddhism. Because whatever the books there are, they are just Puranic books. They don't have any history. So the only authenticate history that we can find it only Buddhist literature. So Buddhism is engaging with different things all the way. Every time something new site of Buddhism is being discovered, not only in India but also Pakistan, Afghanistan and elsewhere. When we look at the past, India was a Buddhist country. We don't have to give evidence for that. In Nagpur itself, there is a big Mansar, Bandara, and Buldhana and Akola and whatever. All the way you go all over this. When you go south, everywhere you go, you will find the Buddhist image. So the question is, what happened to the Buddhists? So the Buddhists were prosecuted and were forced to become untouchables through the process of what is called social boycott. The Brahminical system started boycotting the Buddhists. And social boycott is a process by which the phenomena like untouchability comes into being. It very conclusively proved by the studies of scholars like this P.C. Alexander that I was referring to. He wrote a book in 1948, Buddhism in Kerala, and Baba Sahib Ambedkar's monumental book, Who Were Untouchables, gives us a very clear evidence of what has happened to Buddhism. Okay, so what happened to Buddhists? How the Buddhism declined, how the Buddhism was uprooted from this country. So I recommend you to read that very small but powerful book of Baba Sahib Ambedkar, The Fall and Decline of Buddhism in India. So this is the present, this is the past, and we have to think about our future, the future of our community. And I have underlined some ideas as to how we can go in the future. So number one idea is to understand Baba Sahib Ambedkar's thorough insight and have a clarity on his way of understanding Buddhism. And that's very beautifully encapsulated in the Buddha and his Dhamma, in revolution and counter-revolution, in the Buddha of Marx, and there are a lot of things that we can know that this is what Baba Sahib Ambedkar wanted us to do. Because there are a lot of Buddhisms around, so many Buddhisms around to choose from. So we have to find out what Buddhism we need. Secondly, we have to orient Buddhism towards democracy, towards creating democracy, which means creating a just society, an equal society, a harmonious society. Third, we have to promote the scientific thinking, evidence-based thinking. And the fourth and the final is, when we are talking about our future in Buddhism, we cannot undervalue economy. We have to create wealth, because without creation of wealth, the Buddhism cannot be sustained. Baba Sahib Ambedkar had the ideas to trade with the people in Burma. He wanted to enter into the business of jute bags, and whatever proceedings, profit was to be derived from that business was to go towards revival of Buddhism in India. So we cannot discount the creation of wealth from the movement, from our future. So with these 4 points, I would like to summarize, and I would like to say thank you to my very dear friend Yogesh here for having invited me to talk with you on this topic today. Thank you so much. Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.